The sound of champagne glasses clinking should have been a celebration of achievement and success. Instead, it became the moment when 5 years of carefully orchestrated humiliation reached its breaking point in the gilded ballroom of the Meridian Hotel. As I balanced another tray of cocktails, dodging the wandering hands and condescending smirks of executives who saw me as nothing more than hired help, Marcus Blackwood leaned close to my ear and whispered words that made my blood boil with rage. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Make sure you serve the board members first, sweetheart. They need to see you know your place before tonight's big announcement." I turned to look at this man who had systematically destroyed my reputation, stolen my ideas, and reduced me to serving drinks at what should have been my own company's annual gala. Marcus Blackwood, Senior Vice President of Operations at Pinnacle Tech Solutions, stood there in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandeliers, wearing the kind of smile that had fooled investors and board members for decades. What he didn't know was that tonight would be the last time he would ever have the opportunity to humiliate me. My name is Alexandra Chen, and until that moment in the Meridian Hotel ballroom, I had been living what appeared to be a professional nightmare in the heart of Seattle's tech district. I was 32 years old, a software engineer with 2 computer science degrees, who had been systematically relegated to serving refreshments at company events, despite being the architect behind Pinnacle's most successful product. For 5 years I had endured Marcus's psychological warfare, his calculated attempts to undermine my contributions, and his deliberate sabotage of my career advancement. What Marcus didn't realize was that the company he thought he was about to inherit through a hostile takeover had already changed hands. The partnership agreement he had been manipulating and the board votes he had been buying were about to become irrelevant in ways he could never have anticipated. The serving tray in my hands wasn't a symbol of my defeat, it was my disguise while I watched him celebrate what he believed would be his greatest victory. The foundation of Marcus's campaign against me had been built on a lie that started during my second week at Pinnacle Tech Solutions. I had been hired as a senior software architect after completing my master's degree in computer science at the University of Washington, with a specialization in artificial intelligence and machine learning that had caught the attention of Pinnacle's recruitment team. My graduate thesis on predictive algorithms had been published in 3 major journals, and I had already filed 2 provisional patents for innovative data processing techniques. During my initial interview process, I had been impressed by Pinnacle's stated commitment to innovation and collaborative development. The company had been founded 12 years earlier by Dr. James Patterson, a brilliant engineer who had built the firm's reputation on cutting-edge solutions for enterprise software management. Dr. Patterson had personally recruited me, explaining that Pinnacle was expanding into artificial intelligence applications and needed someone with my specific expertise to lead their newest division. Marcus Blackwood had been Dr. Patterson's second in command for 8 years, having joined the company after a successful career at Microsoft, where he had climbed the corporate ladder through a combination of political savvy and strategic relationship building. When I arrived at Pinnacle, Marcus was responsible for operations and business development, while Dr. Patterson focused on the technical and visionary aspects of the company's growth. The problems began during my 3rd week when I presented my preliminary analysis of Pinnacle's existing software architecture and proposed a comprehensive overhaul that would integrate machine learning capabilities across all their major products. The presentation had been scheduled for the executive team, including Dr. Patterson, Marcus, and the heads of the development and marketing department. I had spent weeks preparing the presentation, creating detailed technical specifications, projected timelines, and cost-benefit analyses that demonstrated how my proposed changes could increase Pinnacle's competitive advantage and revenue potential by at least 40% within 18 months. The algorithms I had developed during graduate school could be adapted to create predictive analytics tools that would revolutionize how their clients managed data and made strategic decisions. Dr. Patterson had been enthusiastic about my proposals, asking detailed technical questions and expressing excitement about the possibilities for patent applications and licensing agreements. The development team leaders had also been supportive, recognizing that my innovations could streamline their existing processes and create new opportunities for professional growth. Marcus, however, had been skeptical from the beginning. During the presentation, he had interrupted repeatedly with questions about implementation costs, timeline feasibility, and market readiness. His concerns had seemed reasonable on the surface, but I had noticed a pattern in his questioning that suggested he was more interested in finding problems than solutions. After the meeting, Dr. Patterson had pulled me aside to express his support for moving forward with my proposal. He had authorized a preliminary budget for developing prototypes and had asked me to begin assembling a team of developers who could work on implementing the core algorithms. The project had been designated as high priority, with Dr. Patterson planning to present the results to Pinnacle's board of directors within 6 months. That's when Marcus's sabotage campaign had begun in earnest. Over the following weeks, I had discovered that he had been having separate conversations with the development team leaders, expressing concerns about my experience and questioning whether the proposed changes were too ambitious for someone so new to the company. He had suggested that my academic background might not translate effectively to practical business applications and had recommended a more cautious approach to implementing new technology. Simultaneously, Marcus had been undermining my authority with the development team members who had been assigned to work on my project. He had scheduled competing meetings during times when I needed to collaborate with key personnel, had redirected resources that had been allocated to my initiatives, and had created bureaucratic obstacles that slowed progress on critical components of the algorithm development. The most damaging aspect of Marcus's campaign had been his systematic appropriation of my ideas and contributions. During executive meetings where I presented updates on the artificial intelligence project, Marcus would later send follow-up emails to Dr. Patterson and other stakeholders that positioned himself as a co-developer of the concepts I had created. He would reference conversations we had never had and claim collaborative credit for innovations that had come entirely from my research and development work. 6 months into my employment at Pinnacle, Marcus had escalated his efforts by questioning my technical competence in front of clients and investors. During a presentation to a potential major client, he had interrupted my explanation of how our predictive analytics could benefit their operations to offer his own interpretation of the technology. His version had been oversimplified and technically inaccurate, but delivered with the kind of confidence that impressed people who lacked the expertise to recognize the error. When I had attempted to correct his misrepresentations, Marcus had smoothly redirected the conversation by suggesting that I was being overly technical and losing sight of practical business application. The client had responded positively to Marcus's approach, apparently preferring his simplified explanations to my detailed technical accuracy. After the meeting, Marcus had suggested to Dr. Patterson that I needed additional training in client relations and business communication. The pattern had continued for months, with Marcus systematically positioning himself as the practical business leader who could translate my technical expertise into commercially viable product. He had begun taking credit for successful project outcomes while attributing any delays or complications to my inexperience with corporate environments. Dr. Patterson, who was increasingly focused on high-level strategic planning and investor relations, had apparently accepted Marcus's narrative about our working relationship. The breaking point had come during my second year at Pinnacle, when Dr. Patterson had announced his intention to step back from day-to-day operations and focus on long-term strategic planning. The transition had created an opportunity for Marcus to position himself as the natural successor to lead the company's operational management. He had been building relationships with board members and key investors, presenting himself as the experienced executive who could guide Pinnacle through its next phase of growth. During this transition period, Marcus had made his most aggressive move against my position within the company. He had proposed restructuring the artificial intelligence division to report directly to him, rather than maintaining the autonomous status that Dr. Patterson had originally established. The restructuring would give Marcus direct control over my projects, my team, and my budget allocation. When I had objected to the proposed changes, Marcus had scheduled a meeting with Dr. Patterson to discuss what he characterized as my resistance to collaborative management and my difficulty accepting feedback from more experienced colleagues. He had presented documentation of our conflicts that portrayed me as inflexible and difficult to work with. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. While positioning himself as a patient mentor who had been trying to help me develop better professional skills, Dr. Patterson, who had been dealing with increasing pressure from investors and board members about operational efficiency and market expansion, had apparently decided that restructuring the artificial intelligence division under Marcus's leadership would streamline decision-making and improve project coordination. The decision had been announced during an all-hands meeting where Marcus had graciously accepted his expanded responsibilities while praising my technical contributions and expressing confidence in our future collaboration. The restructuring had given Marcus complete control over my professional environment and the ability to systematically marginalize my contributions to Pinnacle's success. He had begun reassigning my most innovative projects to other team members, relegating me to routine maintenance tasks and documentation responsibility. When I had protested these changes, Marcus had suggested that I was having difficulty adapting to collaborative team environments and might benefit from additional professional development training. The professional development training had turned out to be a series of workshops on communication skills, team collaboration, and accepting feedback from supervisors. The message had been clear: I was being treated as a problematic employee who needed remedial training and basic workplace competencies. The other participants in these workshops had been recent college graduates and employees who had been placed on performance improvement plans. Marcus had also begun excluding me from important meetings and strategic planning sessions, claiming that my technical focus made me less suited for high-level business discussion. When major decisions were made about the direction of projects I had originally designed, I would learn about the changes through company-wide emails, rather than direct communication. My input was no longer solicited, and my objections to technical modifications were dismissed as resistance to necessary business adaptation. The most humiliating aspect of Marcus's campaign had been his decision to assign me to event coordination and hospitality duties during company functions. What had started as occasional requests to help with setup and logistics had evolved into an expectation that I would serve as waitstaff during investor meetings, client presentations, and company celebration. Marcus had justified these assignments by suggesting that client-facing experience would help me develop better business communication skills. The other executives and senior staff members had apparently accepted this arrangement without question, treating me as hired help rather than a colleague during these events. I had been expected to serve refreshments, collect empty glasses, and maintain a professional smile while listening to conversations about projects I had designed being discussed as though I had no connection to their development. The irony of my situation had been that while Marcus was systematically destroying my professional reputation and career advancement opportunities, the artificial intelligence technologies I had developed were generating enormous value for Pinnacle. The predictive analytics algorithms I had created were being licensed to major corporations for millions of dollars in annual revenue. The patents filed based on my research were creating additional income streams that had transformed Pinnacle from a modest software company into a major player in the enterprise technology market. Marcus had been taking credit for these successes in his presentations to investors and board members, describing himself as the visionary leader who had guided the development of Pinnacle's most valuable intellectual property. He had become the public face of innovations that had originated entirely from my graduate research and my development work during my first year at the company. What Marcus didn't know was that I had been documenting everything. Every email where he had claimed credit for my work, every meeting where he had undermined my authority, every instance where he had assigned me to serve drinks instead of participating in strategic discussions about my own project. I had also been quietly building relationships with board members and key investors who were impressed by the technical innovations that were driving Pinnacle's success. More importantly, Marcus was completely unaware of the conversations I had been having with Dr. Patterson about his growing concerns over the company's direction and leadership. Dr. Patterson had become increasingly uncomfortable with Marcus's management style and his tendency to prioritize personal advancement over collaborative innovation. The founder had also begun to notice discrepancies between Marcus's public claims about his contributions and the actual documentation of project development timelines and intellectual property creation. Patterson had approached me with a proposition that would change everything. He had been considering selling his controlling stake in Pinnacle, but he was concerned about ensuring that the company's innovative culture and technical excellence would be preserved under new leadership. Dr. Patterson had recognized that Marcus's business-focused approach was fundamentally incompatible with the kind of creative problem-solving that had made Pinnacle successful. The proposition Dr. Patterson had presented was both unexpected and perfectly logical. He was willing to sell his 60% ownership stake in Pinnacle to someone who understood the technical foundations of the company's success and who could preserve the innovative culture he had worked to create. He had researched my background more thoroughly and had discovered that my family had substantial financial resources that could support a major acquisition. What Dr. Patterson didn't initially know was that my grandmother, Helen Chen, had been one of Silicon Valley's most successful early investors, building a fortune through strategic investments in technology companies during the personal computer revolution of the 90s. Grandmother Helen had established a family investment fund that was managed by my uncle David Chen, a venture capitalist who specialized in technology acquisitions and had been looking for opportunities to expand the family's portfolio into artificial intelligence and machine learning companies. The Chen Family Investment Fund had been quietly accumulating shares in promising technology companies for over 30 years, building a portfolio worth several $100 million. My uncle David had been particularly interested in companies that owned valuable intellectual property in emerging technology sectors, recognizing that patents and proprietary algorithms would become increasingly valuable as artificial intelligence applications expanded across industries. When Dr. Patterson had approached me about potentially purchasing his stake in Pinnacle, I had immediately contacted my uncle David to discuss the opportunity. The timing had been perfect because the Chen family fund had recently liquidated several major investments and was actively seeking new acquisition targets in the artificial intelligence sector. Uncle David had been impressed by Pinnacle's patent portfolio and revenue growth, but he had been even more interested in my personal involvement with the company's most valuable technology. The due diligence process had taken 3 months, during which my uncle's team of financial analysts and technology experts had thoroughly examined Pinnacle's business operations, intellectual property holdings, and growth potential. The analysis had confirmed that the artificial intelligence technologies I had developed were indeed the primary drivers of the company's recent success, and that the patents based on my research represented significant long-term value. More importantly, the due diligence had revealed the extent of Marcus's deception about his contributions to Pinnacle's technical innovation. The documentation clearly showed that I had been the primary inventor on all the major patents, and that my algorithms were the foundation for the company's most profitable product. Marcus's actual contributions had been limited to business development and operational management, with no significant technical innovations that could be attributed to his work. Uncle David had been particularly interested in the evidence of Marcus's systematic campaign to undermine my professional standing within the company. The Chen family had extensive experience with hostile takeover attempts and corporate manipulation, and they recognized that Marcus was positioning himself to gain control of valuable intellectual property that he had not created. The family's investment strategy had always emphasized protecting innovative companies from exactly this kind of predatory behavior. The acquisition negotiations had been conducted entirely through intermediary representatives, with Dr. Patterson's legal team working with the Chen family's corporate attorneys to structure a purchase agreement that would preserve Pinnacle's operational independence, while providing Dr. Patterson with the financial security he needed for his retirement. Marcus had been completely unaware of these discussions, assuming that Dr. Patterson was simply exploring options for gradual succession planning. The purchase agreement had been finalized 2 weeks before the company dinner where Marcus had made his final attempt to humiliate me. The Chen family investment fund had acquired Dr. Patterson's controlling stake in Pinnacle, with the transaction structured to take effect immediately after the annual investor meeting where Dr. Patterson would announce his retirement from active management. I had been designated as the new majority owner and would assume the role of chief executive officer following a formal board vote. The beauty of the arrangement was that Marcus had been actively campaigning for Dr. Patterson's position without realizing that the entire ownership structure of the company was about to change. He had been building relationships with board members and key investors based on the assumption that they would have the authority to select Dr. Patterson's successor. His political maneuvering and alliance building had been focused on a leadership transition that was never going to happen, the way he anticipated. During the weeks leading up to the company dinner, Marcus had become increasingly confident about his prospects for assuming control of Pinnacle. He had received what he interpreted as positive signals from several board members who were impressed by his business development successes and his apparent leadership of the artificial intelligence division. Marcus had begun making statements about his vision for the company's future and his plans for restructuring operations to maximize profitability and market expansion. The irony was that while Marcus was celebrating what he believed would be his imminent promotion to chief executive officer, I was working with my uncle's team to develop transition plans that would remove him from any position of authority within the company. The Chen family's investment strategy included bringing in experienced technology executives who could work with innovative engineers to build sustainable competitive advantages. Marcus's approach of claiming credit for other people's work while contributing nothing substantial to technical development was exactly the opposite of what the new ownership wanted in company leadership. The company dinner at the Meridian Hotel had been scheduled as a celebration of Pinnacle's most successful financial year and an opportunity for Dr. Patterson to announce his retirement plans to the extended community of employees, investors, and business partners. Marcus had been anticipating that the evening would culminate with his introduction as Dr. Patterson's chosen successor, cementing his control over the company he had been manipulating for years. What Marcus didn't realize was that Dr. Patterson had been planning a very different kind of announcement. The retirement speech he had prepared included a detailed explanation of Pinnacle's sale to new ownership and his recommendation that the company's future leadership should be determined by technical expertise and innovative vision rather than political maneuvering and business networking. Patterson intended to publicly acknowledge my role as the creator of Pinnacle's most valuable technologies and to recommend that the new owners prioritize preserving the collaborative culture that had made the company successful. The serving assignment that Marcus had given me for the company dinner had been his final attempt to establish dominance and demonstrate his authority over my professional status. He had specifically requested that I handle beverage service for the board members and key investors, ensuring that everyone would see me in a subservient role rather than recognizing me as a technical leader and creative innovator. Marcus had wanted the evening to reinforce the narrative he had been building about my appropriate place within the company's hierarchy. What Marcus didn't understand was that my willingness to serve drinks was actually part of a larger strategy. I had wanted to observe the board members and investors while they were relaxed and unguarded, listening to their conversations about the company's future and their expectations for new leadership. The serving role gave me access to discussions that would never have occurred if I had been seated at the executives' table as an equal participant. As I moved through the ballroom with my tray of champagne glasses, I had been gathering intelligence about Marcus's relationships with various stakeholders and his promises about future business strategy. Several board members had made comments about their expectations for continued growth in the artificial intelligence sector, while investors had expressed interest in expanding the patent portfolio and developing new licensing agreements. The conversations had confirmed that everyone was focused on the technical innovations that were driving Pinnacle's success, without understanding that I had been the primary creator of those innovations. Marcus had been working the room with his usual combination of charm and confidence, discussing his vision for scaling the artificial intelligence division and expanding into new market sectors. He had been particularly focused on impressing Elena Rodriguez, the chairwoman of Pinnacle's board of directors, and James Morrison, a major investor who controlled significant voting share. Marcus had clearly been expecting these relationships to support his assumption of executive leadership following Dr. Patterson's retirement announcement. The evening had progressed exactly as Marcus had planned until the moment when Dr. Patterson had taken the podium to address the assembled guests. The founder's speech had begun with the expected reflections on Pinnacle's growth and success, acknowledging the contributions of employees, investors, and business partners who had supported the company's development. Marcus had been beaming with anticipation, clearly expecting his name to be called as Dr. Patterson's recommended successor. Instead, Dr. Patterson had announced the sale of his controlling stake to new ownership and had described the transition as an opportunity to ensure that Pinnacle's innovative culture would continue under leadership that truly understood the technical foundations of the company's success. He had explained that the new owners were committed to preserving the collaborative environment that had made Pinnacle's breakthrough innovations possible while providing the resources needed for expanded research and development. The room had been buzzing with surprise and speculation about the identity of the new owners when Dr. Patterson had called for Elena Rodriguez to join him at the podium for a special announcement. As the board chairwoman had approached the microphone, I had noticed Marcus's confident expression beginning to shift into confusion and concern. He had clearly been expecting a very different kind of announcement. Elena Rodriguez had begun by acknowledging Dr. Patterson's extraordinary leadership and his success in building Pinnacle into one of the most innovative companies in the enterprise software sector. She had described the board's unanimous support for the ownership transition and their confidence that the company would continue to thrive under new leadership that shared Dr. Patterson's commitment to technical excellence and collaborative innovation. Then, Elena had said the words that changed everything. It is my pleasure to introduce the new majority owner and chief executive officer of Pinnacle Tech Solutions, Alexandra Chen, whose groundbreaking research and development has been the foundation of our company's most significant achievements. The silence in the ballroom had been deafening as hundreds of guests turned to look for the new CEO among the executives seated at the head table. Marcus had been scanning the room with growing panic, clearly unable to locate this mysterious Dr. Alexandra Chen, who had somehow acquired control of the company he had been expecting to inherit. I had set down my serving tray and walked toward the podium, removing the catering apron that had disguised my elegant black evening gown underneath. The gasps and murmurs from the audience had been audible as they realized that the woman who had been serving their drinks was actually the new owner of the company. Marcus's face had gone completely white as the full implications of the situation became clear to him. As I had approached the microphone, I had looked directly at Marcus and smiled the same kind of smile he had been giving me for years. The smile of someone who knew exactly how much power they held and was prepared to use it. The serving tray that had symbolized my humiliation was now forgotten on a nearby table, replaced by the podium from which I would announce the changes that would reshape Pinnacle's future and end Marcus's career of deception and manipulation. The moment I had been planning for 5 years had finally arrived. Marcus Blackwood, who had spent half a decade stealing credit for my innovations and reducing me to serving refreshments at company events, was about to learn that his victim had become his owner. The artificial intelligence technologies he had claimed as his own had generated the revenue that financed my acquisition of the company he had been trying to steal through political maneuvering and systematic sabotage. Tonight would be the last time Marcus would ever have the opportunity to humiliate anyone, because tomorrow he would be unemployed. The serving tray he had forced me to carry would become a symbol not of my subjugation, but of my patience and strategic thinking. And the company dinner where he had tried to establish his dominance would be remembered as the night when justice was served along with the champagne. The microphone felt surprisingly steady in my hands as I looked out at the sea of shocked faces in the Meridian Hotel ballroom. Marcus stood frozen near the bar, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips, his eyes wide with the kind of disbelief that comes from watching your entire world collapse in a single moment. The executives who had been treating me like hired help just minutes earlier were now staring at me with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. "Good evening," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system to every corner of the ballroom. For those who don't know me, I'm Alexandra Chen, and as Elena just announced, I'm now the majority owner and CEO of Pinnacle Tech Solutions. Some of you may recognize me as the woman who's been serving your drinks tonight, which seems like an appropriate place to start this conversation. A nervous laugh rippled through the audience, but I could see the discomfort on many faces as people began to understand the implications of what they had witnessed. Board members who had been joking with me about keeping their glasses full were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats, clearly wondering what other assumptions they had made incorrectly about the evening's dynamic. Over the past 5 years, I've had the unique opportunity to observe this company from a perspective that most CEOs never experience. I continued, allowing my gaze to sweep across the room before settling on Marcus, who looked like he might be sick. I've served refreshments during board meetings where my own innovations were discussed as though I had no connection to their development. I've been excluded from strategic planning sessions about projects I designed, and I've watched colleagues take credit for breakthrough technologies that originated from my research and development work. The silence in the ballroom was absolute now, with even the catering staff pausing in their duties to listen to what was clearly an unprecedented corporate announcement. Elena Rodriguez remained at the podium beside me, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes showing unmistakable satisfaction with the drama unfolding. "Tonight marks the beginning of a new era for Pinnacle Tech Solutions," I said, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. "An era where innovation and collaboration will be valued over political maneuvering and credit theft. An era where the people who create breakthrough technologies will be recognized and rewarded for their contributions rather than marginalized and humiliated by those who seek to profit from others' genius." Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak than his usual confident baritone. "This is impossible," he said, loud enough for much of the room to hear. "You can't just buy a company and expect to run it. You don't have any executive experience." I smiled at him with genuine amusement, feeling a surge of satisfaction at his obvious panic. "You're absolutely right, Marcus. I don't have executive experience in the traditional sense. But I do have something much more valuable. I understand every line of code, every algorithm, and every patent that makes this company profitable. Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus's face flushed red as he struggled to formulate a response. Several board members exchanged glances, clearly remembering the many times Marcus had deflected technical questions or provided oversimplified explanations that demonstrated his limited understanding of Pinnacle's core technology. "Let me share some interesting facts with our distinguished guests," I continued, turning my attention back to the broader audience. "Over the past 5 years, Pinnacle Tech Solutions has filed 17 major patents related to artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. I am listed as the primary inventor on 16 of those patents. The revenue generated from licensing those patents accounts for 68% of Pinnacle's total income. The predictive analytics platform that our largest clients rely on was developed entirely from algorithms I created during my graduate research at the University of Washington." I paused to let these statistics sink in, watching as investors and board members began to understand the true source of Pinnacle's recent success. Marcus looked increasingly desperate, his eyes darting around the room as he searched for allies who might support him in this unexpected crisis. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering how the woman who was serving drinks tonight managed to acquire controlling interest in a company valued at over $200 million, I said, enjoying the anticipation I could see building in the audience. "The answer involves a family investment fund that has been quietly building a portfolio of technology companies for over 30 years. I gestured toward a distinguished Asian man in his 50s who had been seated at one of the investor tables. "I'd like you to meet my uncle David Chen, managing partner of Chen Family Ventures, which has just become Pinnacle's majority shareholder. Uncle David, would you like to say a few words about our acquisition strategy?" David Chen stood and approached the podium with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of successful business negotiations. He was wearing an impeccably tailored suit and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most influential person in any room. As he took the microphone, I could see recognition dawning on several faces among the investor table. "Good evening," David said, his voice carrying the slight accent that revealed his immigrant background, and the absolute authority that came from his reputation in Silicon Valley investment circle. Chen Family Ventures has been monitoring Pinnacle Tech Solutions for the past 18 months, as part of our strategy to invest in companies with valuable intellectual property in emerging technology sector. What attracted our attention initially was the impressive portfolio of artificial intelligence patents and the rapid revenue growth from licensing agreements. He paused to scan the audience, his experienced eye identifying the key stakeholders and decision-makers who would be most important for Pinnacle's future success. However, what convinced us to make this acquisition was the opportunity to reunite ownership control with the technical expertise that created those valuable innovations. Too often we see brilliant engineers marginalized by corporate politics, while less qualified individuals claim credit for their work. This acquisition represents our commitment to supporting authentic innovation and collaborative leadership. Marcus had been listening with growing agitation, and he finally stepped forward from his position near the bar. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "You can't just waltz in here and take over a company based on some patent. Pinnacle's success depends on business development, client relationships, and operational management, not just technical innovations." David Chen regarded Marcus with the kind of cool assessment that venture capitalists reserve for entrepreneurs who are about to be replaced. "Mr. Blackwood, isn't it?" he said, his tone suggesting that he had been thoroughly briefed on Marcus's role in the company. "I understand you've been instrumental in managing Pinnacle's business operation. I'm curious about your specific contributions to the artificial intelligence technologies that generate the majority of the company's revenue." The question was delivered with surgical precision, designed to expose exactly the gap in expertise that Marcus had been trying to hide for years. Marcus's mouth opened and closed without producing any coherent response, his usual smooth deflection tactics failing him in this high-stakes confrontation. "I've been leading the AI division for the past 3 years," Marcus finally managed to say. "I've overseen the commercialization of our technologies and managed the relationships with our largest licensing clients." "Overseen," David repeated, emphasizing the word with subtle skepticism. "That's an interesting choice of terminology. Can you explain the mathematical foundations of the predictive analytics algorithms that those clients are licensing? Or perhaps describe the machine learning models that enable the pattern recognition capabilities that your sales team has been promoting?" Marcus's face had gone pale again, and beads of sweat were becoming visible on his forehead despite the ballroom's comfortable temperature. The technical questions were exposing his fundamental lack of understanding about the technologies he had been claiming to lead, and everyone in the room with any technical background could see his inadequacy. "The specific technical details are handled by my development team," Marcus said, his voice becoming defensive. "My role is strategic oversight and business development." "I see," David said, with the kind of polite dismissal that experienced investors use when they've identified a weak link in a company's management structure. "And how do you evaluate the strategic direction of technologies that you don't personally understand? How do you make resource allocation decisions for research and development initiatives when you lack the technical expertise to assess their feasibility or potential value?" The questions were devastating because they highlighted the fundamental contradiction in Marcus's position at Pinnacle. He had been claiming leadership credit for innovations he couldn't explain while simultaneously arguing that technical expertise wasn't necessary for strategic decision-making. The board members and investors were beginning to understand that they had been relying on someone who was essentially a skilled salesman rather than a technology leader. "Strategic leadership is about more than technical details," Marcus said, his voice rising as he became more desperate. "It's about understanding market opportunities, building client relationships, and managing complex business operations. You can't run a technology company by just focusing on engineering problems." I stepped back to the microphone, ready to deliver the evidence that would end Marcus's credibility permanently. "That's a fascinating perspective, Marcus. Let me share some information that might help our guests understand your approach to strategic leadership and business operation." I gestured to my uncle, who handed me a tablet containing the documentation we had prepared for this moment. The files represented months of investigation and analysis, building a comprehensive case against Marcus's management methods and business practices. "Over the past 6 months, we've conducted a thorough audit of Pinnacle's operations as part of our acquisition due diligence, I explained, scrolling through the digital file. The results were quite illuminating, particularly regarding the relationship between actual innovation and claimed contributions to company success. I looked directly at Marcus, who was now visibly sweating and appeared to be considering whether he could somehow escape from the ballroom without causing an even greater scene. For example, we discovered that in 17 presentations to investors and clients over the past 2 years, you claimed credit for developing or co-developing technologies that were created entirely by other team members. In 12 of those instances, you specifically claimed to have contributed to innovations that I had developed independently. The numbers were damning because they demonstrated a systematic pattern of deception rather than isolated incidents of miscommunication. Marcus wasn't just taking occasional credit for collaborative work. He was consistently and deliberately misrepresenting the source of Pinnacle's most valuable intellectual property. We also found extensive email records showing your efforts to undermine my authority and exclude me from strategic discussions about projects I had designed. I continued, my voice remaining calm and professional despite the magnitude of the accusations I was making. These emails included explicit strategies for marginalizing my contributions, while positioning yourself as the primary technical leader for artificial intelligence initiatives. I scrolled to another section of the documentation, displaying financial analyses that revealed the true impact of Marcus's management on Pinnacle's operation. Perhaps most troubling, we discovered that your business development strategies have consistently prioritized short-term revenue over long-term innovation sustainability. You've been pressuring clients to accept simplified versions of our technologies rather than investing in the research and development needed to maintain our competitive advantages. This revelation was particularly significant because it suggested that Marcus's approach to business management was actually damaging Pinnacle's long-term prospects. By focusing on immediate profits rather than continued innovation, he had been undermining the foundation of technological leadership that made the company valuable to clients and investors. The financial analysis shows that revenue growth from existing patents has been slowing under your leadership because you've been reluctant to invest in the advanced research needed to develop next-generation technologies, I explained, showing charts that illustrated the concerning trend. Meanwhile, competitors have been gaining ground by investing heavily in artificial intelligence research and development. The data was irrefutable and particularly damaging because it contradicted Marcus's claims about his strategic business leadership. Instead of being the visionary executive he portrayed himself as, the evidence showed that he was actually a short-sighted manager who was squandering Pinnacle's technological advantages through poor resource allocation and strategic plan. Marcus made one final attempt to regain control of the narrative, stepping closer to the podium with the kind of aggressive confidence that had intimidated colleagues and subordinates for years. These accusations are completely unfounded, he declared, his voice carrying across the ballroom. I've dedicated 8 years to building this company's success, and I won't stand here and listen to character assassination from someone who thinks she can buy her way into a leadership position. The response revealed everything wrong with Marcus's approach to corporate leadership. Instead of addressing the specific evidence or technical questions, he was falling back on personal attacks and emotional appeals. He was also making the fundamental mistake of treating ownership and technical expertise as separate and unrelated qualifications for leadership. Character assassination, I repeated, allowing a note of genuine amusement to enter my voice. That's an interesting phrase coming from someone who has spent 5 years systematically destroying my professional reputation while stealing credit for my innovation. I turned to address the broader audience, making sure that everyone understood the full scope of what had been happening at Pinnacle under Marcus's influence. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight is the culmination of a 5-year campaign of workplace harassment, intellectual property theft, and systematic marginalization designed to steal credit for breakthrough technologies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The accusation was serious enough to create legal liability, and I could see several of the corporate attorneys in the audience taking notes and exchanging concerned glances. Marcus had clearly not anticipated that his behavior would ever be characterized in such explicit legal terms or documented with sufficient evidence to support formal accusation. Blackwood's approach to leadership, I continued, is his assumption that serving drinks somehow disqualifies someone from understanding business strategy or executive decision-making. This assumption demonstrates exactly the kind of thinking that has been holding back innovation and collaboration at Pinnacle. I gestured toward the serving tray that still sat on the nearby table where I had abandoned it. That serving tray represents 5 years of careful observation and strategic plan. While Marcus was focused on impressing board members and claiming credit for other people's work, I was building the technical expertise and business relationships necessary to acquire this company and restore it to authentic leadership. The symbolism was powerful because it transformed the humiliation Marcus had intended into evidence of my patience and strategic thinking. The serving role he had assigned to diminish my professional standing had actually provided me with unique insights into the company's operations and stakeholder relationships. Starting tomorrow, Pinnacle Tech Solutions will begin operating under new leadership principles, I announced, my voice gaining strength as I described the changes we had planned. Technical innovation will be recognized and rewarded appropriately. Collaborative development will replace competitive credit claiming. And strategic decisions will be made by people who understand both the business implications and the technical realities of our product. I paused to make eye contact with key employees and team leaders throughout the audience, many of whom had been marginalized or undervalued under Marcus's leadership. We'll be conducting comprehensive reviews of all current projects, reassigning responsibilities based on actual expertise and contributions, and implementing new management structures that prioritize collaborative innovation over individual advancement. The changes I was describing would fundamentally reshape Pinnacle's corporate culture, moving away from the hierarchical credit-claiming environment that Marcus had created toward a more collaborative and technically focused approach to development and strategy. We'll also be expanding our research and development budget by 40%, I continued, with new initiatives focused on next-generation artificial intelligence applications, machine learning optimization, and predictive analytics platforms that will maintain Pinnacle's competitive leadership for the next decade. These announcements were designed to demonstrate that the new ownership had both the financial resources and technical vision necessary to guide Pinnacle's continued growth. Unlike Marcus's focus on short-term revenue maximization, our strategy emphasized long-term innovation, sustainability, and market leadership. Marcus had been listening with increasing desperation, and he finally made his most serious tactical error by attempting to challenge the legitimacy of the acquisition itself. "This whole situation is legally questionable," he said, his voice carrying a note of panic. "You can't just buy controlling interest in a company without board approval and shareholder notification requirements." David Chen stepped back to the microphone with the kind of patience that experienced investors reserve for people who clearly don't understand corporate law. "Ms. Blackwood, I appreciate your concern about legal procedures, but I should clarify that this acquisition was completed through entirely proper channels with full board approval and appropriate shareholder notifications." He gestured toward Alina Rodriguez, who nodded in confirmation. Patterson's controlling stake was acquired through a purchase agreement that was reviewed and approved by Pinnacle's board of directors 3 weeks ago. All shareholders were notified according to SEC requirements, and the transaction was structured to comply with applicable corporate governance regulations. The legal clarification was devastating for Marcus because it revealed that board had been aware of and supportive of the ownership change while he had been completely excluded from the process. His assumption that he would inherit leadership of the company had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the actual power dynamics and decision-making authority within Pinnacle's corporate structure. The board's unanimous approval of this acquisition, Alina Rodriguez added, stepping back to the microphone, was based on our assessment that new ownership would be better positioned to maximize the value of Pinnacle's intellectual property and maintain the company's competitive advantages in rapidly evolving technology market. Her statement was particularly damaging because it implied that the board had lost confidence in Marcus's ability to lead the company effectively. The unanimous vote suggested that even his apparent allies among the board members had concluded that change was necessary for Pinnacle's continued success. Furthermore, Alina continued, The board conducted extensive interviews with key employees and team leaders as part of our evaluation process. The feedback we received about current management practices and workplace culture was instrumental in our decision to support this ownership transition. This revelation meant that Marcus's colleagues and subordinates had been providing negative feedback about his leadership to the board of directors. His campaign of marginalization and credit claiming had not only damaged my career, but had also undermined his standing with the very people he had been trying to impress. I stepped back to the microphone for what would be my final statement of the evening, ready to conclude this confrontation and begin the process of rebuilding Pinnacle's corporate culture. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for witnessing this transition and for your continued support of Pinnacle's mission to develop innovative technology solutions that create value for our clients and opportunities for our employees. I looked directly at Marcus, who appeared to be in a state of shock as the full implications of his situation became clear. Mr. Blackwood, your employment with Pinnacle Tech Solutions is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and you'll receive information about final compensation and benefits processing from our Human Resources Department. The termination announcement was delivered with professional courtesy but absolute finality. There would be no negotiation, no opportunity for Marcus to argue his case or attempt to salvage his position. His years of manipulation and credit theft had culminated in complete professional destruction. Your access to company systems has been revoked, and all company property including laptops, mobile devices, and access cards must be surrendered before you leave the building tonight. I continued, ensuring that Marcus understood the comprehensive nature of his dismissal. Any attempt to contact current employees or clients about this transition will be considered corporate interference and will result in legal action. The security measures were necessary because Marcus had demonstrated a pattern of manipulative behavior and might attempt to sabotage Pinnacle's operations or relationships in retaliation for his termination. By establishing clear boundaries and consequences, we were protecting both the company and our employees from potential harassment or interference. As I concluded my remarks and stepped away from the podium, the ballroom erupted in a mixture of applause, shocked murmurs, and animated conversations as guests tried to process what they had witnessed. Some of the applause came from employees who had been marginalized under Marcus's leadership, while investors and board members appeared to be calculating the implications of the ownership change for Pinnacle's future performance. Marcus stood near the bar for several more moments, apparently unable to comprehend that his career at Pinnacle had ended so abruptly and publicly. His face showed a mixture of rage, disbelief, and growing panic as he realized that he would need to leave the ballroom under the watchful eyes of everyone who had just witnessed his professional destruction. Two security guards approached Marcus with professional courtesy but unmistakable authority, ready to escort him from the building and ensure that he complied with the termination requirement. As they flanked him on either side, Marcus finally seemed to understand that his situation was irreversible and that any further resistance would only make his humiliation more complete. The walk from the ballroom to the hotel exit felt like it took forever, with hundreds of eyes following Marcus's departure and conversations pausing as people watched the man who had been expecting a promotion instead face the end of his career. The serving tray he had forced me to carry had become a symbol of his downfall, representing the arrogance and short-sightedness that had ultimately led to his destruction. As the ballroom doors closed behind Marcus and his security escort, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction mixed with anticipation for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The company that had marginalized and humiliated me was now mine to rebuild, and the innovations that Marcus had tried to steal would finally be developed and recognized under leadership that understood their true value and potential. The silence that followed Marcus's departure felt different from any quiet I had experienced during my years at Pinnacle. It wasn't the tense, uncomfortable silence that had characterized staff meetings when he was present, or the fearful hush that fell over development teams when he walked through their workspace. This was the silence of possibility, of a company collectively exhaling after years of holding its breath under oppressive leadership. As the ballroom doors closed behind the security guards escorting Marcus out, conversations began to resume throughout the room, but with a different energy than before. Employees were approaching each other with excitement and relief, while investors and board members clustered together in animated discussions about the implications of the ownership transition. I could see my development team members finding each other across the room, their faces showing a mixture of vindication and anticipation that made my heart swell with pride. Elena Rodriguez approached the podium where I remained, her expression reflecting both professional satisfaction and personal admiration. "That was masterfully handled, Alexandra," she said quietly, using my first name for what felt like the first time in our professional relation. "I've been hoping for an opportunity to address Marcus's behavior for months, but the board needed concrete evidence and a viable alternative leadership structure." Her admission revealed something I had suspected but never been able to confirm, that Marcus's manipulative tactics had been recognized by key stakeholders, but they had felt constrained by corporate governance requirements and fiduciary responsibility. The board couldn't simply remove a senior executive without substantial documentation and a clear succession plan that would protect shareholder interests. "The documentation your uncle's team provided was exactly what we needed to take decisive action," Elena continued. "But more importantly, your technical expertise and vision for the company's future convinced us that this ownership transition would strengthen rather than disrupt Pinnacle's competitive position." David Chen joined our conversation, carrying the satisfied expression of an investor who had successfully identified and acquired an undervalued asset. "The due diligence process revealed that Pinnacle's actual value is significantly higher than its current market valuation," he explained. "Marcus's short-term revenue focus was preventing the company from capitalizing on long-term opportunities in artificial intelligence applications and patent license." His assessment confirmed what I had suspected during my years of watching Marcus make strategic decisions based on quarterly profit targets, rather than sustainable innovation development. The technologies I had created were capable of generating much more value than Marcus's business model had been capturing, particularly in emerging markets where predictive analytics and machine learning were becoming essential competitive advantage. "Starting Monday, we'll begin implementing a comprehensive restructuring plan," I announced to Elena and my uncle, though I was speaking loudly enough for nearby employees and investors to overhear. "The first priority is identifying and promoting the people who have been doing exceptional technical work without receiving appropriate recognition or advancement opportunity. This approach would address one of the most damaging aspects of Marcus's leadership, his tendency to suppress talented employees who might challenge his authority or expose his technical limitations. Many of Pinnacle's most innovative engineers had been relegated to routine tasks or excluded from strategic projects specifically because their expertise made Marcus uncomfortable. I want to schedule individual meetings with every member of the development team over the next 2 weeks," I continued, outlining the transition strategy I had been developing with my uncle's advisory team. "We need to understand who has been contributing to which projects, who has ideas for improving existing technologies, and who has been prevented from advancing due to political rather than performance consideration." The meetings would serve multiple purposes: identifying hidden talent that Marcus had been suppressing, gathering information about projects that had been mismanaged or misdirected under his leadership, and demonstrating to employees that the new ownership valued their contributions and perspectives. Most importantly, the meetings would help rebuild the collaborative culture that Dr. Patterson had originally established but that Marcus had systematically undermined. James Morrison, the major investor who had been one of Marcus's primary targets for relationship building, approached our group with the kind of cautious optimism that experienced financial professionals show when they're reassessing their investment strategy. "Chen, I have to admit that tonight's revelations have been quite surprising," he said, his tone respectful but clearly seeking reassurance about the company's future direction. "I'm particularly interested in your plans for scaling the artificial intelligence technologies that have been driving revenue growth," he continued. Marcus had been presenting expansion strategies that focused on licensing existing patents to new market segments, but your approach seems more focused on continued research and development. His question highlighted one of the fundamental differences between Marcus's business philosophy and the strategy I intended to implement. Marcus had viewed Pinnacle's intellectual property as a finite resource to be monetized as quickly as possible, While I understood that continued innovation was essential for maintaining competitive advantages in rapidly evolving technology markets, the licensing revenue from existing patents is certainly valuable, I replied, but it represents only a fraction of the potential value we can create through continued research and development. The artificial intelligence field is advancing so rapidly that companies must invest heavily in next-generation technologies or risk becoming obsolete within 5 years. I gestured toward several members of my development team who had gathered nearby, clearly hoping to participate in discussions about the company's technical direction. The people who created our current technologies have dozens of ideas for improvements and applications that Marcus never allowed them to pursue. Our expansion strategy will focus on developing those innovations rather than simply maximizing short-term revenue from existing products. This explanation seemed to resonate with James Morrison and other investors who understood that technology companies required continuous innovation to maintain their market position. Marcus's approach of treating intellectual property as a static asset had been fundamentally incompatible with the dynamic nature of artificial intelligence research and development. We're also planning to establish partnerships with major universities and research institutions, David Chen added, providing details about the expansion strategy we had been developing. These partnerships will give us access to cutting-edge research and help us recruit the best graduate students and faculty members in artificial intelligence and machine learning field. The university partnerships represented a significant departure from Marcus's insular approach to business development. Instead of viewing other research institutions as competitors or threats, we intended to build collaborative relationships that would accelerate innovation and provide access to talent and resources that Pinnacle couldn't develop independently. Additionally, we're planning to triple our patent application budget over the next 18 months, I explained, sharing another key component of our growth strategy. The intellectual property we develop during this expansion phase will provide licensing revenue for decades, while also creating barriers to entry that protect our market position. The patent strategy was particularly important because it would transform Pinnacle from a company that owned valuable but limited intellectual property into an organization that continuously generated new innovations and competitive advantage. Marcus's reluctance to invest in advanced research had been putting the company at risk of being surpassed by competitors with more aggressive development programs. Patterson approached our group, having spent the past hour circulating through the ballroom and observing reactions to the evening's announcement. His expression showed the relief and satisfaction of a founder who had successfully transferred his company to leadership that shared his values and vision. Alexandra, I wanted to thank you for handling this transition with such professionalism and grace, he said, his voice carrying genuine emotion. Watching Marcus's behavior over the past year had been increasingly difficult, but I wasn't sure how to address the situation without damaging the company's stability and employee morale. His admission revealed the impossible position that Marcus's manipulation had created for Pinnacle's founder. Patterson had recognized that Marcus was taking credit for other people's work and creating a toxic corporate culture, but removing a senior executive without concrete evidence and a succession plan could have triggered lawsuits, employee departures, and investor confidence problems. The acquisition approach solved multiple problems simultaneously, Dr. Patterson continued. It provided me with the financial security I needed for retirement, ensured that the company would be led by someone who understands its technical foundations, and removed Marcus from a position where he could continue damaging employee morale and innovation potential. The strategy had been elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to reform Marcus's behavior or work around his limitations, we had simply eliminated his authority by changing the ownership structure of the company. The approach had been more expensive than internal reorganization, but it had also been more decisive and comprehensive. I'm particularly excited about the research partnerships and patent development initiatives you've described, Patterson said, his enthusiasm evident as he discussed the technical aspects of our expansion plans. Those were exactly the kind of long-term investments I had wanted to pursue, but couldn't justify under the quarterly profit pressures that Marcus was advocating. His comment highlighted another advantage of private ownership over the public company structure that Marcus had been promoting. Instead of being constrained by short-term earnings expectations and quarterly reporting requirements, We could invest in research and development initiatives that might take years to generate revenue, but would create substantial long-term value. As the formal program concluded and guests began to transition toward networking and social conversations, I found myself surrounded by employees who wanted to express their support for the ownership change and share their ideas for improving Pinnacle's technical capability. The contrast with previous company events was remarkable. Instead of avoiding me or treating me as peripheral to important conversations, colleagues were actively seeking my input and perspective. Maria Santos, one of the senior developers who had been working on machine learning optimization, approached with barely contained excitement. "Chen, I've been developing some algorithms for real-time data processing that could revolutionize how our clients handle predictive analytics," she said, her words tumbling out rapidly. Marcus kept saying the development timeline was too long and the market applications were too uncertain, but I think the potential value is enormous. Her description was exactly the kind of innovative thinking that Marcus had been suppressing in favor of incremental improvements to existing products. Maria's algorithms represented the kind of breakthrough technology that could establish Pinnacle as a leader in next-generation artificial intelligence application. "I'd love to see your research," I replied, genuinely interested in understanding the technical details and commercial potential of her work. "Let's schedule a meeting for early next week so you can walk me through the algorithms and we can discuss resource requirements for full development." The offer to provide resources and support for advanced research seemed to energize Maria and other nearby developers who had been listening to our conversation. They were clearly accustomed to having their innovative ideas dismissed or postponed indefinitely under Marcus's leadership. "Actually, let me introduce you to some other team members who have been working on related technologies," Maria said, gesturing toward a group of engineers who had been observing our conversation. "We've been collaborating informally on some projects that could integrate with the algorithms I mentioned." The informal collaboration she described was exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that thrived in supportive environments, but was stifled under authoritarian management. Marcus's insistence on controlling all project development had prevented the natural partnerships and knowledge sharing that often produced the most innovative solutions. Over the next hour, I had similar conversations with more than a dozen employees who shared ideas for improving existing technologies, developing new applications, and expanding Pinnacle's capabilities in emerging market sectors. The breadth and sophistication of their proposals confirmed that Marcus had been sitting on a treasure trove of innovation potential that could transform the company's competitive position. The most frustrating aspect of working under Marcus was watching good ideas die because they didn't fit his predetermined business strategies, explained Robert Kim, a software architect who had been developing advanced user interface design. "We knew we were capable of creating breakthrough technologies, but we weren't allowed to pursue anything that might disrupt his quarterly revenue projection." His comment captured the fundamental problem with Marcus's approach to innovation management, treating creativity and research as threats to short-term stability rather than investments in long-term success. The mindset had been particularly damaging in a technology sector where competitive advantages could emerge and disappear within months. "Starting Monday, we're establishing new project development protocols that will encourage experimentation and collaborative innovation," I announced to the group of employees that had gathered around me. "Instead of requiring detailed business justifications for every research initiative, we'll allocate discretionary budgets for exploratory development and provide time for engineers to pursue promising ideas." The announcement generated visible excitement among the development team members, many of whom had been frustrated by bureaucratic obstacles that prevented them from testing innovative concepts. The new approach would restore the entrepreneurial culture that had originally made Pinnacle successful under Dr. Patterson's leadership. "We're also implementing quarterly innovation showcases where team members can present their research projects and receive feedback from colleagues and leadership," I continued, describing another element of our cultural transformation strategy. "The best projects will receive additional funding and resources for full development, and contributors will receive recognition and advancement opportunity." The showcase format would address multiple problems that had developed under Marcus's leadership: the lack of communication between different development teams, the absence of recognition for innovative work, and the limited opportunities for talented employees to advance based on their technical contributions, rather than political maneuvering. Elena Rodriguez had been observing these conversations with obvious satisfaction, clearly pleased to see employees engaging enthusiastically with new leadership and expressing optimism about the company's future direction. As the evening progressed toward its conclusion, she approached me with final thoughts about the transition process. "The employee reactions tonight have been extraordinarily positive," she said, keeping her voice low enough to maintain confidence. "I've been attending these company events for 6 years, and I've never seen this level of enthusiasm and collaborative energy among the technical staff." Her observation confirmed what I had been sensing throughout the evening, that Marcus's departure had removed a significant source of stress and frustration that had been affecting employee morale and productivity. The change in atmosphere was immediate and dramatic, suggesting that his negative influence had been even more extensive than I had realized. "The board is prepared to provide full support for the restructuring initiatives you've outlined," Elena continued, providing the official endorsement that would be essential for implementing major organizational change. "We're particularly interested in the university partnerships and patent development strategies, which align perfectly with our long-term growth objective. The board's support would be crucial for navigating the regulatory and financial complexities of expanding research operations and establishing external partnerships." Their endorsement also provided protection against any potential legal challenges that Marcus might attempt to pursue regarding his termination or the ownership transition. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave the ballroom, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. The woman who had entered the Meridian Hotel carrying a serving tray was leaving as the CEO of a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, with the authority to reshape its culture and direct its future development. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, despite the dramatic nature of the evening's revelations. It had been the result of years of careful planning, strategic relationship building, and meticulous documentation of the problems that needed to be addressed. The serving tray that Marcus had intended as a symbol of my subordination had become a tool for gathering intelligence and building the case for his removal. David Chen approached as I was saying goodbye to the last groups of employees, his expression showing the satisfaction of a successful investor combined with the pride of a family member who had helped orchestrate a significant victory. "The transition exceeded all our expectations," he said, reviewing the evening's outcomes. "The employee support, board endorsement, and investor confidence provide an excellent foundation for implementing the expansion strategies we've planned." His assessment was encouraging because it confirmed that the acquisition had achieved all its primary objectives: removing destructive leadership, establishing credible technical authority, and creating support for long-term innovation investment. The evening had also demonstrated that Pinnacle's value proposition was much stronger than its previous leadership had been able to articulate. "Tomorrow we begin the real work," I said, feeling both excitement and anticipation about the challenges ahead. Rebuilding company culture, implementing new development processes, and creating the kind of collaborative environment where breakthrough innovations can flourish. The rebuilding process would require careful attention to both technical and interpersonal dynamics. We needed to restore trust among employees who had been marginalized under Marcus's leadership, while also establishing new performance standards and accountability measures that would prevent similar problems from developing in the future. "I'm particularly looking forward to the university partnerships," David replied, sharing details about preliminary conversations he had already initiated with research institutions. "Stanford, MIT, and Carnegie Mellon have all expressed interest in collaborative arrangements that could provide access to their artificial intelligence research program. The partnerships would give Pinnacle access to cutting-edge research and talented graduate students, while providing universities with real-world applications for their theoretical work. The arrangements would also establish Pinnacle as a leader in academic industry collaboration, enhancing its reputation and attracting additional partnership opportunities." As we prepared to leave the Meridian Hotel, I took one final look around the ballroom where so much had changed in a single evening. The space had been transformed from a venue for my humiliation into the site of my triumph, and the company that had marginalized and undervalued me was now mine to rebuild according to principles of fairness, innovation, and collaborative excellence. The weeks following the company dinner unfolded with the kind of productive energy that I had dreamed about but never experienced during my years under Marcus's leadership. Monday morning brought the first of many individual meetings with development team members, each conversation revealing new insights about suppressed innovations, misallocated resources, and collaborative opportunities that had been prevented by the previous management structure. The extent of Marcus's damage became clearer with each conversation. Talented engineers described projects that had been cancelled for political rather than technical reasons, research initiatives that had been defunded to maximize short-term profit, and collaborative partnerships that had been rejected because Marcus feared they might diminish his personal authority. The accumulated lost opportunities represented millions of dollars in potential revenue and years of competitive advantage that had been sacrificed to protect one person's ego and career advancement. Under the new leadership structure, we're implementing project development protocols that prioritize technical merit and innovation potential over political considerations, I announced during the first all-hands meeting under my leadership. Every research proposal will be evaluated by committees of technical experts rather than individual executives, and funding decisions will be based on scientific assessment, rather than personality conflicts or territorial concern. The new protocols addressed one of the most destructive aspects of Marcus's leadership, his tendency to make unilateral decisions about technical projects based on personal preferences, rather than objective evaluation criteria. The committee-based approach would ensure that innovative ideas received fair consideration, regardless of their source or their potential impact on existing power structure. We're also establishing clear intellectual property recognition policies that will ensure proper attribution for innovative contributions, I continued, addressing another area where Marcus's practices had been particularly damaged. Patent applications will list all actual contributors, project documentation will accurately reflect individual contributions, and advancement opportunities will be based on measurable technical achievement. The intellectual property policies were designed to prevent the kind of credit theft that had characterized Marcus's approach to innovation management. By establishing transparent documentation requirements and verification procedures, we could ensure that future innovations would be properly attributed and that talented employees would receive appropriate recognition for their contribution. The response from the technical staff was overwhelmingly positive, with productivity and collaboration improving dramatically within the first month of the transition. Projects that had been stalled under Marcus's leadership began advancing rapidly as artificial barriers were removed and resources were reallocated according to technical priorities rather than political consideration. Maria Santos's real-time data processing algorithms, which Marcus had dismissed as too experimental, were completed and tested within 6 weeks of receiving proper funding and support. The initial results exceeded all projections, demonstrating processing speeds that were 50% faster than competing technologies and accuracy rates that surpassed industry standards by significant margin. These algorithms could revolutionize predictive analytics for financial services, supply chain management, and healthcare applications, Maria explained during a presentation to the board of directors. The commercial licensing potential is extraordinary, and the competitive advantages could establish Pinnacle as the definitive leader in real-time artificial intelligence application. Her presentation generated immediate interest from board members and investors who understood the transformative potential of breakthrough technology. The contrast with Marcus's approach was striking. Instead of suppressing innovation to protect existing revenue streams, we were actively pursuing developments that could create entirely new market opportunities. The university partnerships that David Chen had been developing also began producing tangible results within the first quarter of new ownership. Stanford's Artificial Intelligence Research Program provided access to advanced machine learning techniques that enhanced our existing algorithms, while MIT's collaboration brought expertise in neural network optimization that improved the efficiency of our predictive analytics platform. The academic partnerships are providing access to research capabilities that would cost tens of millions of dollars to develop independently, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the former Stanford professor we hired to direct our new advanced research division. More importantly, the collaborations are attracting brilliant graduate students and faculty members who want to work on practical applications of theoretical research. The talent acquisition benefits of the university partnerships were proving to be as valuable as the technical knowledge sharing. Pinnacle was attracting applications from some of the most promising researchers in artificial intelligence fields, people who were excited about the opportunity to develop breakthrough technologies in a supportive and well-funded commercial environment. The patent application program was also producing impressive results, with our legal team filing 37 new patent applications in the first 6 months under new ownership. The applications covered innovations ranging from advanced data compression techniques to novel machine learning architectures, creating an intellectual property portfolio that would provide competitive protection and licensing revenue for decades. The patent portfolio we're building will establish Pinnacle as one of the most valuable intellectual property holders in the artificial intelligence sector, explained our patent attorney during a quarterly review meeting. The innovations being developed under the new research protocols are not just improvements to existing technologies, they represent fundamental advances that could define industry standards for years to come. The intellectual property strategy was particularly important because it created multiple revenue streams, while also establishing barriers to entry that protected Pinnacle's market position. Unlike Marcus's approach of maximizing revenue from existing patents, our strategy emphasized continuous innovation that would maintain competitive advantages, even as individual technologies became commoditized. The financial results of these strategic changes exceeded all projections, with revenue increasing by 43% in the first year under new ownership, despite significantly increased investments in research and development. The growth was driven by licensing agreements for new technologies, expanded client relationships based on improved product capabilities, and patent licensing deals that generated substantial passive income. The financial performance demonstrates that investing in innovation actually increases profitability rather than reducing it. David Chen reported to a gathering of technology investors who were studying Pinnacle's transformation. The key is ensuring that research and development initiatives are directed by people who understand both the technical possibilities and the commercial application. His analysis was becoming a case study for other technology companies that were struggling to balance short-term profitability with long-term innovation requirements. Pinnacle's success under new ownership was proving that technical expertise and collaborative management could generate superior financial results compared to the political manipulation and credit claiming that characterized many corporate environments. The most satisfying aspect of the transformation was watching employees flourish in an environment where their contributions were recognized and their ideas were valued. People who had been marginalized and underutilized under Marcus's leadership were emerging as creative leaders who generated innovative solutions to complex technical challenges. Robert Kim's user interface designs, which Marcus had rejected as too advanced for commercial applications, were implemented across all major products and became one of Pinnacle's most distinctive competitive advantages. The interfaces were so intuitive and efficient that clients began requesting similar designs for their internal systems, creating an entirely new consulting revenue stream. The most rewarding aspect of this job is finally being able to pursue ideas that have real potential instead of just working on projects that have been pre-approved by people who don't understand the technology. Robert explained during an interview with a technology industry publication. The new leadership understands that innovation requires experimentation and that breakthrough technologies often emerge from unexpected directions. His comments were typical of the feedback we were receiving from employees who had experienced both management approaches. The contrast between collaborative leadership and authoritarian control was producing measurable improvements in productivity, creativity, and job satisfaction that translated directly into superior business results. 2 years after the company dinner that transformed Pinnacle's ownership and leadership, I stood before another industry gathering, this time as the keynote speaker at the National Artificial Intelligence Conference. The ballroom was filled with technology executives, research scientists, and investors who were eager to understand the management principles and strategic approaches that had made Pinnacle one of the fastest-growing companies in the artificial intelligence sector. Innovation thrives in environments where technical expertise is valued over political maneuvering, where collaboration is rewarded more than competition, and where long-term vision guides decision-making rather than short-term profit maximization, I explained to the audience of industry leaders. The most valuable technologies are created by people who understand both the theoretical foundations and the practical applications of their work. The presentation included case studies of specific innovations that had emerged from Pinnacle's collaborative research environment, demonstrating how the management principles we had implemented translated into concrete technological advances and commercial success. The audience was particularly interested in the university partnership model and the intellectual property recognition policies that had attracted top talent and generated breakthrough innovation. The transformation of Pinnacle demonstrates that technical leadership and business success are not contradictory objectives, I continued, addressing one of the most persistent misconceptions in corporate management. Companies that prioritize authentic innovation and collaborative development consistently outperform organizations that rely on credit claiming and political manipulation. After the presentation, I was approached by dozens of executives and researchers who wanted to discuss specific strategies for implementing similar changes in their own organization. Many described situations that were remarkably similar to what I had experienced under Marcus's leadership, talented technical people being marginalized by politically skilled managers who lacked the expertise to make informed decisions about innovation priorities. The most important lesson from Pinnacle's transformation, I told a group of venture capitalists who were evaluating technology companies for potential investments, is that sustainable competitive advantages come from people and processes, not just products and patents. Companies that invest in creating collaborative cultures and supporting innovative thinking will consistently outperform organizations that prioritize short-term financial metrics over long-term capability. The advice was based on direct experience with both management approaches and their measurable outcome. The contrast between Marcus's leadership and the collaborative environment we had established provided compelling evidence that corporate culture directly influenced both innovation potential and financial performance. As I reflected on the journey from serving drinks at a company dinner to speaking at industry conferences about management innovation, I realized that the transformation represented more than just personal vindication or professional advancement. It demonstrated that talented people could overcome systematic marginalization and create environments where authentic innovation flourished. The serving tray that had symbolized my humiliation under Marcus's leadership had become a reminder of the importance of patience, strategic thinking, and collaborative vision in achieving meaningful change. The company that had treated me as hired help was now recognized as an industry leader in artificial intelligence innovation, and the technologies that Marcus had tried to claim credit for were being developed and recognized under leadership that understood their true value and potential. Most importantly, the transformation had created opportunities for dozens of talented employees who had been suppressed under previous management. The collaborative culture we had established was producing breakthrough innovations while also providing professional development and advancement opportunities that were based on technical merit rather than political maneuvering. The woman who had once balanced serving trays while listening to conversations about her own innovations was now directing research initiatives that would influence artificial intelligence development for decades. The humiliation that Marcus had intended to establish his dominance had instead provided the motivation and strategic insight necessary to remove him from power and rebuild Pinnacle according to principles of fairness, collaboration, and authentic innovation. The company dinner at the Meridian Hotel had indeed been a celebration of achievement and success, though not in the way that Marcus had anticipated. It had marked the end of an era characterized by credit theft and systematic marginalization, and the beginning of a new phase of collaborative innovation and sustainable growth that honored both technical excellence and human dignity. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.